In 1994, Alton Towers debuted one of the most important roller coasters of its time, Nemesis. This is a custom inverted coaster designed by John Wardley and the teams at Bolliger and Mabiard out of Switzerland. It was one of the first B&M inverts to make its debut. It came only 2 years after the original Batman the Ride at Six Flags Great America. And unlike that layout, which was designed to fit on a flat piece of ground that you could plop down at any park you want, this was designed for Alton Towers. The park has a very specific height requirement that they can't build above the tree line. So how exactly are you supposed to fit in a 104-foot tall drop and reach speeds of 50 miles per hour? You do so by going down. The teams at Alton Towers blasted holes in the ground so that Nemesis could thread through trenches, and it creates one of the most interesting layouts ever designed. The ride rarely ever gets off the ground and was an instant success. It's effectively the most famous roller coaster in the entire country, and had a great run, operating until 2022 when Alton Towers closed it down. After 28 years of continuous operation, Nemesis was shown its age. The park had to make a choice, tear it down or do an extensive refurb. They chose the latter, removing most of Nemesis's original track and completely rebuilding the ride from the ground up. Introducing Nemesis Reborn, making its debut in spring 2024. This is the same original layout but an upgraded theme, all new colors, and an even more detailed story. The same old Nemesis that you loved is back with a vengeance, and I got the opportunity to experience it for my first time a few months after its debut, and in this review, we're going to talk about the entire experience. We'll discuss the individual elements as well as how it compares to the original Nemesis. I first experienced Nemesis back in 2018 during my first visit to Alton Towers. I liked the ride, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't my favorite invert. I think my expectations were a little high. I genuinely believed that it was overhyped for me. But with all new track and new theming, I was curious how this one was going to stack up. Maybe I would like the ride even more now, so let's discuss what makes this different. First and foremost, we have what is easily the most complex color scheme of any roller coaster ever built. Out goes the rusted old white track, in is the sleek new black track with these hand-painted red veins covering the entire layout. It is unbelievable, unlike anything we've ever seen before. I remember when those first pieces of track showed up in the parking lot and people were like, whoa, how's this gonna look? You know, it's one thing to see it up close on one singular piece of track, but when it's all in place as one big completed layout, it looks phenomenal. I was blown away by the presentation of Nemesis Reborn. The entire surrounding area of the Forbidden Valley got a facelift. The big new focal point is the central eye on the side of the station building. The Nemesis station was always designed to look like this huge alien creature, but now it feels alive, and it is not happy. I love the individual claw movements. It is so cool to see how the eye will sync up with the train. It knows when the ride is cycling. It almost feels like a show. Like you could easily be a non-rider visiting Alton Towers and be totally entertained by the area around Nemesis Reborn. One of my favorite improvements they brought to this area, and I'm curious how long they'll keep this up. There were actual walk-around characters surrounding Nemesis. We saw security personnel from the Phalanx, that is the organization that is keeping the Nemesis creature captive. We saw protesters who were upset about this and just wanted it released. It just created this incredibly well fleshed out story that also ties into the adjacent attraction Nemesis Subterra. I think that was an excellent addition for its opening year, and I hope that they stick around. Because in the past, Merlin has been known to do some budget cutting here and there, and I think it would be very easy to just say, alright, let's get rid of the characters, and you slowly start to see the attraction lose its pizzazz. Like, as much as I love the colors on Nemesis Reborn, I can't help but wonder if it's going to look like crap in a couple years. We've seen how faded Coaster Track can get, and this might eventually end up looking gray and pink. So we'll have to wait and see, but as you enter underneath the Nemesis Reborn sign, you'll begin your walk up the mountain by Nemesis' first drop. Alton Towers is a terrain park, and to make Nemesis work, they had the lift hill hug the mountainside, so when you crest over, you're still only a few feet off the ground. It's quite amazing. And these were views that you didn't really used to get before with the old Nemesis queue. And they even brought new thematics to it, such as this piece of track right here. Supposedly during construction it didn't fit, so they just plopped it down here to use as theming. There's a custom Nemesis soundtrack playing in the area to add to the ambiance. It's so cool seeing these huge Phalanx shipping containers with all their equipment that they're doing for studying the creature. There's custom audio saying things like the Phalanx can't be trusted. They're experimenting on a creature. Sedation levels dropping. There's been a containment breach, and you hear various alarms. There's alien growling sound effects. effects. It reminds me of the dinosaur roar from Jurassic Park. It's amazing. When I say they breathe new life into this attraction, it feels like so much more of a complete experience than it used to. And then you reach the station. Here, it feels like you're actually inside the Nemesis creature's stomach. You see bones and tissue, and it very much is giving Stranger Things vibes. Easily now the best themed station at Alton Towers, and they had some good ones, but this was on another level. The only downside, during the overhaul, they removed the front row queue for Nemesis. So it makes it that much harder to get a front row ride, which unfortunately might just be the best way to experience this coaster. Because the ride features so many near misses, the only way you get that clean view is in the front row. Ride in the back if you want a bit more of an intense experience. Specifically, everyone recommends back right. The first and last corkscrews whip you so hard there. Absolutely experience it in that spot, but if you can, I highly recommend a front row ride. I remember back in 2018, I was actually underwhelmed with my first ride on Nemesis, which was towards the back. It wasn't until I rode up front when I really could appreciate it for its terrain usage. You know, you can look at it all you want in the queue and appreciate just how low it stays, but when you are literally like a foot or two away from hitting the cliffside, it adds to your sense of fear, like, oh, did they give enough clearance? Are we going to make it? But also increases your sense of speed. 50 miles per hour objectively is not that fast. Most of you probably drove faster to get to Alton Towers. But when you're navigating these extremely compact maneuvers, it is relentless, and Nemesis Reborn has great pacing. It all begins with a slight right-hand turn out of the station and an ascent up a lift hill that will drop you off only 43 feet above the ground. You're back in the woods and begin with a slight gradual ramp down to the left and then a 104-foot tall drop, but it's really not much of a drop. It's just a gradual descent downwards and then somehow has enough speed to flip you into a corkscrew. And then things get crazy. You get thrown to the right in this half helix that is so intense. It's absolutely a gray out moment. It throws you so hard. It's like, wait a minute, where did all this speed come from? That's what makes this ride like a masterpiece in design. You suddenly are going so fast out of nowhere. You keep banking to the right and then fly through some smoke that gets shot up near the eye directly into a 0G roll. This passes directly over the station and chucks you into another trench. You rise up into a hard bank turn that you'll keep to the right, wrapping around some ports and then dropping back into a tunnel into a vertical loop. You're just barely able to thread this gap and then you rise up into this more gradual bank turn. This is the one element on the ride where there's potential for you to start to lose some speed. How Nemesis runs will absolutely vary depending on the time of day and also the environment, what's the temperature outside. The coaster warms up, so if your last ride of the day, this probably won't be too bad, but if you're riding in the morning, this turn might feel a little slow. But as you keep going around this turn, you shoot through some fog and get thrown into one final inversion. This is another corkscrew. Very whippy moment, throwing you into another quick tunnel. There's more fog, a right-hand turn, and that's what takes you into the brake run. Nemesis Reborn has 2,349 feet of track. So it is not a long ride at all, but it is very punchy. It makes good use out of the minimal track length that it has. And after my first rides going in, I remember thinking, you know, I just wish it had like one or two more elements. The problem is, where do you put it? They clearly were tight on space. They literally had to shoehorn Galactica in partially over Nemesis to make that ride work. I doubt they had room for another element, but that's where rewritability comes into play. I think the proper way to enjoy Nemesis Reborn is to get multiple laps on it. You'll notice different things each time and it'll give you a much better feel for it. But how does it compare to the original Nemesis? That's the question everyone wants to know, right? In terms of ride experience, I thought it felt pretty similar. The main difference is this one does have a bit more of a rattle. As old as Nemesis was, it was surprisingly smooth. And unfortunately, we live in a day where new B&M coasters are not the glass smooth attractions that they used to be. It's unfortunate, but it's a trend that we've seen over the past couple years. It is not just a Nemesis problem. I didn't think it was a huge deal here. The main time that you really notice it is with that final turn that takes you into the brake run. And I think that's because it's at the slowest moment. It's right there at the end of the ride. When you're cruising along, it's not that bad. It wasn't enough to take away from the layout and the actual core of the ride experience. Versus some other new B&M coasters where I felt like the shake or rattle did significantly take away from the ride experience. so it could be a lot worse. I still very much enjoyed the attraction. I think it was a very well-deserved upgrade from the original Nemesis. As much as I do wish it was glass smooth, I think it was worth it for the longevity of the attraction. We're soon reaching a point where parks all over the world are having to make these tough decisions of what do they do with these older B&M coasters that have kind of run the length of their service life. And I applaud the teams at Alton Towers and Merlin Magic Making for choosing to keep this attraction around, build on the legacy it's left behind, and create something new for future guests to look forward to. Nemesis is way more than just a roller coaster for so many people, and I think other parks could take a look at what Alton Towers did with Nemesis Reborn and realize this is a golden example of how you can market and redo an attraction that'll get people excited. There's no doubt that it was an expensive investment that you're essentially doing in place of a new ride that you could be building instead. But long term, I believe more guests would rather see your park in tip-top shape than continuing to build new attractions when you aren't taking care of what you already got. So I say hats off to Alton Towers. For Nemesis Reborn's final score, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. It's an excellent ride. It is still one of my favorite B&M inverted coasters. Honestly, I'm not even sure it's my favorite in Europe. I really like Black Mamba and Osiris, and I think this is right up there with them. But I can 100% acknowledge just how special this attraction is. And the engineering feat and the creativity that went into its creation is just stellar. Let me know down in the comments below, what are your thoughts on Nemesis Reborn? If you agree with the points I brought up, if you think there's anything I missed, be sure to post that down below. And stay tuned for more coaster reviews here at Coaster Studios, and I'll see you next time.